right, everybody. Welcome to the April 10th, 2019 meeting of the Freedom Hub Working Group. We've got a pretty interesting topic today that's becoming more important as days go by, for sure. And we've also got some great stuff lined up coming down the road here. Before we kind of kick off with Paul and let a few more people show up, Charles, why don't you give us a quick rundown on what's coming over the next several weeks?
Well, thanks, Jeff. And coming up next week, we have another scholar from the Cato Institute. Of course, we had a colleague of his last week, Doug Bandow, warn us against all these interventions that aren't doing any good and are, in fact, endangering us. His colleague, Jeff Singer, a retired surgeon, will talk about the equally problematic opioid crisis. It's really a war on paying patients, as we'll find out. If that's something that someone in our group disagree with, well, come join the fireworks next week. And then the following 2 weeks after that, we're going to have a couple spending control advocates. That seems to be the issue always forgotten with all the tax advocates, is what about the overspending and debt? And then 4 weeks from now, we'll return to healthcare with some Tea Party folks. And it'll be a hot button issue for the campaigns, with the media saying Republicans have no answers. There are lots of answers, but maybe no one knows about them, and maybe there's some disagreement what those answers should be. So that's going to be what is the healthcare solution from the right going to be? That'll be a good discussion. And Jeff, that's what's coming up in a few weeks.
Fantastic. Well, today we've done to find out a little bit about the problem with selective service and compulsory service and national service and all these other ways they've masked the idea of kind of getting people to become a little bit servitude to the government, and that we owe everybody some government services, or I'm going to assume. So, Paul, I'm going to let you take over here momentarily. I was going to say, Charles, if you want to do a little bit of an intro on him would be great.
Sure. So Paul Jacob is someone I met more or less during the Governor Gary Johnson for President campaign, and maybe beforehand at Cato when I was there a long time ago. But reading on his bio, I was pretty impressed with what I didn't know. I guess back in your days, Jeff, with Ron Paul in the 80s, Paul Jacobs was one of the prime petitioners to get him on the ballot in most of the states. Okay. And then he went on to really solidify his position as a master petitioner for a bunch of different issues, mainly term limits. And I think he set a record for getting term limits on the ballot in more than a dozen states in the early 90s. He's also done eminent domain to stop the cronies from stealing property for private uses, and to stop local governments from surprising drivers at red light places to steal their money if you go like a half a millionth over the speed limit. And now he is returning to a cause that really made him famous, because back in the 80s, Paul Jacob refused to sign up for selective service. And that put him in the clinker for a few months, despite some character testimony from Ron Paul and Ed Clark back then. This is an issue, obviously, that's close to his heart, because he was caged for his position. And now he wants to stop Congress from bringing back the draft, or expanding it to women, or even expanding it to not just for the military, but for national service. If you want young folks to do something, hire them, he says. So that's what I know about Paul, Jeff.
Sounds like a winner to me. Paul, I'm going to give you the floor, and if there's anything he's left out in that intro, please fill in the gaps.
Okay, I don't think he left out very much. Thanks, Charles. Jeff, thank you, and thank everybody who's taken the time to join up on this webinar. I want to just kind of set where selective service and the idea of a draft, where draft registration is, what's the chance of national service coming back, and kind of set up where we are on the issue, and then talk about what we can do about it. Draft registration, I refused to register. I was the first group in 1980 who was supposed to register, 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds, and then it began as people turned 18, they were required to register. I was one of the 14 people who were prosecuted and convicted of refusing to register for the draft. We were all very public. It wasn't as if they didn't have enough evidence to say we didn't register, but of course, we believed that the draft was unconstitutional. We believed it was a big mistake, and I think, and we'll get back to this throughout this hour, but it is, to me, the pinnacle issue in terms of you either believe that people are free or you believe that the government has a claim on them that can be, you know, completely elastic all the way to their death. And it used to be that, you know, well, we needed the draft because what else could we do? We had to have military people. And of course, the reality is we've always had more than enough soldiers. In fact, I think if we have a problem in terms of recruiting enough soldiers, the problem is only that we can fight stupid, bad wars and still recruit a pretty decent number of soldiers. So if there's any problem with it, it's not that we aren't able to recruit people when we need them. It's that, in essence, we're able to recruit people even when they probably should have better sense and say no. And that's just a hit on our foreign policy. And I'm not going to spend really any time talking about foreign policy or other, you know, issues that are connected. But obviously there are some. So draft registration has been around since 1980. They prosecuted some people. I knew before I was prosecuted, because we follow selective service very closely, that in their reports to Congress and so on, they had done a public relations study. And we got a copy of that public relations study. This is like probably 1983 or 84, 85. That's when I went on trial. And the public relations study told them flat out, stop prosecuting people. Because every time the selective service prosecuted someone for refusing to sign up, more people refused to sign up, not less. It didn't scare people into registering. It woke people up and caused fewer people to register. And since most people aren't affected by it anyway, women don't register, only people when they turn 18. So, you know, most of the country is older or younger and not affected. And so it's one of those things where, you know, it's not something we're all thinking about, but this registration program does continue to take effect, and they've stopped prosecuting wisely, but they are doing things that make it a very tough thing not to do. For one, college money is riding on whether you can prove that you've registered for the draft. Federal employment. Now, for a lot of people, they're not going to work for the feds. They're not going to college, or maybe they have enough money without federal help, so it doesn't affect them. But I believe the number is 40 states. It may be 41 that have a requirement that you cannot get a driver's license if you can't prove you've registered for the draft. So the massive state that libertarians constantly point out to people can, in so many different ways, leverage you and coerce you with your own money, is absolutely doing that in spades when it comes to draft registration. I spoke to one of the commissioners on this national commission, and I'll explain about them in a second, but this national commission on military, national, and public service. I spoke to one of the commissioners, and she told me that 40% of the people who register for the draft today do not know that they registered for the draft. Now, you know, I live and breathe this, so that immediately hit me, but it might take a second to kind of consider what does that mean? What it means is we have this program that they will also tell you is designed to send, you know, fear to the Chinese and the Russians and all of our enemies, because we have young people ready to be conscripted. And of course, that's a ridiculous joke. You know, the Chinese are not stupid. The Russians aren't stupid. Our enemies are not stupid. They're not scared by a list that, frankly, if there ever was a need for its use, would be thrown in the trash can because they can't keep it updated. People don't change their address, so on and so on. And they would instead take this list that they've spent millions and to put together and throw it in the trash because it's pretty much worthless, and they go onto the open market and get a real list. At least if they wanted to hit more young people. So in essence, the whole basis of this is just absurd. We don't need the draft, even if there was a major war. There is tremendous opposition. Charles Rangel, the former New York congressman who served forever, loved the draft, put in bills to have a draft. In 2004, before the election, his bill was sitting in Congress, and there began to be rumors about the possibility that after the election, with things happening in Iraq and so on, Bush was going to institute a draft. There was such tremendous opposition to that in polling and others that Republicans were scared it could be used against them. They brought Rangel's bill up, and I believe it got 3 votes and 430 something against, including Rangel voting against his own bill. So there, and you can look at polls. Rasmussen did one not too long ago. The draft is not popular. The people don't want it. The military doesn't need it. But it's got to be defeated for being a really stupid idea, because while I don't think they'll come back with a full draft where everyone's being drafted because they just don't need the manpower, they have established this commission, the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. And they're looking for this commission to do 2 things. They're looking for this commission to either tell them they don't have to extend draft registration to women, which the federal courts, and I'll just stop for a second before I come back to this commission. The federal courts back in 1980 took a case that said, wait, this is discriminatory against men because only men are going to be drafted, only men are going to have to register. And the court looked at that and they said, it's a reasonable thing to do. Women are not permitted in combat positions, so why would we register them and draft them when they can't fulfill the function anyway? Well, a lot has changed. Now women are allowed in, not conscripted in, big difference, but they're allowed in, as they should be, into any combat position that they can earn a spot in. Seems like a silly thing to want to earn a spot in, but thank goodness we have soldiers at certain times. Anyway, so that has changed completely. There's a new case. There's actually several, but there's one that's kind of ahead of the others. And there was a federal judge who a month or so ago ruled, which is obvious, that now that women are allowed in every combat position, it is discriminatory on account of sex not to have women also register for the draft and be drafted. And just as an aside, as it probably doesn't come up, but it's something I think about, it's very easy for them to extend registration because, of course, nobody gets killed because they register for the draft, at least immediately. If there ever is a draft, it's a nightmare because I think men are going to sue and say, wait a second, I'm being drafted into combat and there aren't as many women being drafted in because they're not going to need all the manpower, and they're going to want to have a national service component so that they can make it a warm fuzzy that's helping everybody, helping young people, as if mopping the floor at the EPA and being dragged out of your career path or work path for a year is some special benefit you're getting. And of course, it's going to be, think of all the things they can, they're going to feed the hungry. They're going to go into all the wilderness areas and pick up every piece of trash in the country. I mean, we have all these different things that are going to magically happen if we're able to force young people with very little skills, or they just go get these jobs. And we're going to spend all this money we're gonna have all these people working who don't really have skills, and we're gonna pretend that that's gonna save the country and teach them a whole bunch of skills that are gonna make them wonderful, fully actualized citizens. Our country will be perfect forever. So it's, in my sense, what I'm afraid of is not so much that, oh, tomorrow they're gonna, call everyone up into a military draft. The people who run this country are not stupid, and they can read poll numbers, and they're not going to do that. But the threat of national service and them getting a military draft without having to fully account for the fact that they're forcing people into the military because they have this other national service component, I think is a very real possibility. It's a threat. I'm not saying that, boy, tomorrow it's going to happen. It's for sure. It may be well less than 50-50. But if you tell me that my kids who are working their ass off to get through college, to build their own life, are going to have that ripped up for a year so that they can do something some stupid ass politician in Washington wants them to do, I don't like the odds being 1 in 3 or 1 in 10 or anything. And I also think that we as libertarians, limited government people, free market conservatives, liberals who I might disagree with on economics, but who don't like war and don't like slavery. This is a wonderful issue to alert people that, wait a second, ultimately, we own our own lives. Young people are not just ours to take and do with whatever the hell we feel like doing. That's not what freedom's about. What freedom's about is that you cannot do that. You cannot. And so, I have a friend who said, well, chances of this coming back, very slim. There's this, and we can play all the odds. I'm not playing any of them. I'm just thinking there is an issue here that is a sleeper, and that is important for us to beat in an intellectual way, in a political way, and I want to beat it. And of course, what they're doing is this little pretend thing of service. We're studying service and how people can serve better. And I went to an event they had in Denver, and they had about an hour and a half worth of program, different people coming up to talk about how they'd worked for AmeriCorps, or how they'd worked for this thing or that thing, and how they learned stuff from their job and how it was wonderful. And I thought, who the hell are you kidding? Of course, it's why, give people jobs. Like Charles mentioned in the little thing I sent him, I said, if you want young people to do something, then offer them a job doing it. So what they are trying to do is somehow conflate that it's just all service. If you get a job that you've always wanted, that's service. If someone drags you out of your home in the middle of the night and clubs you with a stick and throws you into a prison cell and then says, go kill people or be killed, that's service. Same thing. What's the difference? And so it's critical. And there were 2 minutes afterwards, and I got up and said that basically, this is bullshit. And you are creating a huge fraud. And I'm not so sure that you want to create that fraud, but that's what you're doing. And we, it just seems to me that this is essential that we confront this issue. And I think it's fairly easy. And I'm going to say why I think it's easy. People are with us. The government knows they need this little dog and pony show to pretend that they've talked to everyone and they've been thoughtful and they love everyone and, it's all going to be great. We have to prick that balloon. We have to blow this whole thing up, and we can do so very simply. They have a portal, and I have a lot of stuff at the This Is Common Sense website on the draft and so on, and I have links to how to get to that portal. But Jeff, you might just show them the portal. Share your thoughts, and there's a couple different. You can come to my website and get information on the draft. if you're looking for something, what would I say exactly? But I don't think you need that. And if you go to their website, they ask some questions about the military draft or selective service. You can answer those questions. And I wrote a commentary where I in depth answered those. But you could just, I think Jeff just did, you could just type in "this is bullshit" and hit submit. And I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying you can do anything you want. You can give them a long statement. You can give them a short statement. You can put your name and where you live, and that probably adds some clout to it in some way, but you don't have to. I want to get 100,000 people to leave a comment saying no. No draft. Don't extend draft registration to women. End it for men. No national service. No forced service or involuntary servitude or slavery or compulsion. We're free people. You work for us. You're not taking away our rights in any way, shape, or form. And recognize that. And the reason to have the battle here is because the Congress is even smarter politicians. They're not going to spend a lot of time debating this and taking hits. They did this commission because they realize this is a tricky issue. And so I want to unload everything we can. I've kind of said, look, they want comment. Let's give them comment good and hard. And I'm not suggesting that we get on this website and we, call the people on the commission names or say bullshit all the time. That's not gonna, that's not a good strategy. I mean, it is bullshit, but we want thoughtful comments. We want every sort of comment. And if you say no, I'd rather just tell them go to hell. You can do that too. But the more comments we can get here, and the more we can focus here, we're gonna FOIA the results. We already have been. We've already got a list of the comments so far, and they're running more negative than positive. But I want that to not even be close. I want 100 negative comments for every one that's positive, and then I want to be able to say, here's the FOIA, here's all the comments. They're running, 86% against this, and you've got to come to grips with that. So I just think we have an opportunity here to prevent something very bad from possibly happening. I'm not here to tell you it's going to happen. It's coming tomorrow. It's coming next week. I got no crystal ball, but I think it's important enough to stop it, because I think of what I went through, and I think the idea of my kids, who frankly, my kids and the other kids I know, I've got my oldest is 35, my youngest is 19, but I'm around enough young people. They're working their butt off. When I was a young person, you could work your way through college without being a brain surgeon. Young people today, and it's, they deserve rights, whether they're really nice people or not so nice. But young people today are working their butts off. And the idea of stopping them and preventing them from succeeding and from moving ahead and wasting a year of their life or two it just makes me see red. And so I want to stop that. And I also think that this is an important discussion to have. If I thought there was no chance, I'd probably, there's a lot of things to do in this world. But I think whatever chance there is that something bad could happen here and that we could reverse it and make it not happen, and maybe do something good like end registration across the board. And they're going to go one way or the other. They have to. So we know we're at a critical point. But I think there's some real value in connecting with young people, in connecting with other people. I see this as a way to get a lot more people, especially young people, interested in other political issues, because they see how important this issue is, and they see the whole debate about who really is the sovereign. If the government's the sovereign, then yes, they got all kinds of rights over our lives. They're not. We are. That's the whole point of America. And I just think this is a great issue to do that. And since I could spout on and so on, let me stop there. But I can use whatever help people can give. But I think one of the beauties of this is that you could post something on Facebook. You could go to this share your thoughts page. You can weigh in on this issue in 3 minutes and actually, I think, make a difference. And so I beg you to do that. Help us, help send a message on this issue, and there you have it.
Paul, that's very good. And I'll tell you, it's like another little insidious thing that's happening in the background no one ever is really cognizant of, because, I remember selective service too, and you just registered and didn't think twice about it. But, now they've grafted it up into this level of, climbing into your life, as a word, into your kids' lives and so on. When did this start to become a reality? Was this just in the last administration, or has this been perking for a while in the background, or how did it get to this point?
Well, the history is really that they, Carter brought it back, and you have to remember, it really is. You think of, I think of everything as yesterday, but this was a long time ago. This is the end of the 1970s, and Carter had given amnesty to Vietnam era resistors. And all of a sudden, he's got all these foreign policy, the Soviets invade Afghanistan, you've got the hostages being taken. I don't know why. We were always so nice to Iran. Little joke there. But, you had all these things blow up. And so he came back with, we need draft registration. I think he saw it as a cheap way to look a little tougher. There was tremendous resistance to it early on. They had like 75% of the people registering. That's a huge level of resistance, one out of every four. And they never did get much in the way of increased registration. They were always way below what historically would have been the case. And it just was a sign that this program has no support, and that if you were to hold a draft out of this program, see, what they have to pretend is that they can run a fair draft. It's really important when people are being enslaved or murdered. It's really important to do it fairly, and so that's their focus. And they want to be able to claim, well, we have all the registration, so your chance of being enslaved or murdered is really not much more than the next guy's. You're supposed to feel good about that, and so they want to be able to pretend this list is something. And so since 1980 to today, they've prosecuted it first. They realized by the mid 80s that prosecuting was a loser, not a winner. It doesn't scare anybody. It makes everyone hate them. And so they stopped doing that. And then they slowly passed these things. It was Solomon, who was a congressman in New York, started to look for other ways that you could punish people for not registering for the draft. And so they took away federal benefits. And then they went to the driver's license, because, young people don't get a whole lot of federal benefits. Most of them don't. But they do want to have a car. They might want to go on a date. Anyway, so that's where they've gone to. And I think they were really fine with nothing being said. We get to have our jobs. We get to have this list. Everybody's happy. Nobody's going to prison. We're just harassing young people, but that's a small thing. It's not in the papers. And so it just rolls on. It wasn't until they realized they have to extend draft registration to women or the program goes away. The federal courts are going to say, you can't have a program that just includes men and doesn't include women. That violates the 14th Amendment. It's discriminatory. And so now they're stuck. They can't just kind of let the bureaucracy roll on and hope nobody asks any questions. They either have to end draft registration or they've got to extend it to women. And it's just a matter of time. And of course, I think what's working in their favor is that as a society, nobody's really against equal rights. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody somewhere, and there are probably 3 or 4 out of 310 million people. But for the most part, hardly anyone is saying, oh, we need draft registration, but we don't need it for women, or women, they couldn't possibly be strong enough to be in the military. We live in a little bit different time, and all of that is completely accepted. So the main thing I think they're going to push now is it needs to be equal. We believe in equality. We love equality. And never confront the fact that if they extended the draft registration, then sooner or later, a woman who does not want to be in the military is going to be drafted and put in the military, just like men were. And I see that as horrible. Now, I don't see it as any more horrible than when they do it to a man, but I do see it as horrible. And so we have a huge opportunity now, and it's really this court case and this situation where the draft registration is built on quicksand that gives us an opportunity to speak out about it, to point out how completely useless it is. We don't need it. It doesn't fit with our military. It doesn't fit with our philosophy, i.e. freedom. It would degrade the armed forces, not improve them. And then, but I think as we get closer to any type of decision, they may decide draft registration isn't the place to do it, and they can extend it. And what they want to do instead is some sort of national service program, which should all be warm and fuzzy. I mean, the way they sell it, it's all going to be wonderful. It's all to benefit young people and the country. Everybody wins. And so that's why I think it's so essential that we hit this now, because we have a chance to end registration rather than extend it. And I have a fear that the next step may be not to look at the registration part, because the military part, people think about being blown apart, and sell it more as a national service. Everyone owes their fellow man, all the warm, fuzzy, altruistic stuff. And so that's where we are. This has really been a program that was very much opposed, that kind of got past the initial years to where everything went quiet. And then this court case has made it relevant. And again, it means they have to do something to change. And in that change, we have an opportunity to knock them off track.
That's a great response. Go ahead, Charles.
Paul, thanks, Jeff. Paul, a couple questions here, and let me first announce to the registrants, go ahead and look on that window in your upper right of your window and click the raise hand icon if you want to ask a question. And I'll ask first, Paul. A couple things. Could you comment, and I'll ask both questions, then you can comment, on your transition from term limits hero leader to eminent domain, red lights, camera, back to this draft issue? And the second question I hope you can answer is, divide the national service and draft a bit here. If they try to sell this as national service, the first part is, will national service equate draft, or will it be completely separate? And do you think the really big risk time for this is if the recession hits, where folks will be out of work, and if the Democrats take over especially, I would think they get the national service thing passed. Works through that scenario, and then also a bit about your other issues.
Well, the other one's easy, because it actually, I'm a little amused because I resisted the draft. It was a big, I went to prison. There was a big court case in Little Rock, Arkansas, and my friends and my friends' parents and they all, some agreed. Most of the parents, at least, probably didn't agree. Certainly didn't want their kid to do the same thing. And so there was a certain way they viewed me. And then when I started doing term limits, it just always caught me as funny that my friends would say, "Boy, my parents sure think you've turned over a new leaf and you're a wonderful guy now." And so I always kind of joked. I always was amused by that. There's nothing different in any of these issues. I might be more, now that I've done term limits, I might be more apt to say we don't want politicians to be dictating our lives just instead of just government, because I recognize that part of the reason we're in this is that we have a Congress that doesn't represent us, because if it represented us, they wouldn't be having any of these discussions. Nobody, I mean, there are people out there, there's about 30% who likes the idea of national service, but there's no support for this type of program. This is not Congress wanting to put their ear to the ground and find out where the American people are. They know Congress is somewhere else. So I see it as all in part of the same thing. And of course, I'm continuing to work. Liberty Initiative Fund, our main focus is initiatives that really deal with three categories: hold government accountable, things like term limits, ethics reforms, basic pension reform, basic, pay your bills, do the right thing, don't violate the Constitution, don't take over government and make it your fiefdom, those sorts of issues. Then fight crony capitalism is our second area kind of initiatives that we work on. And that's, eminent domain reform, ending all these occupational licensing requirements, all kinds of things like that, stopping subsidies of wealthy, baseball team owners and so on. And we think that's very important because it's an issue in which the right and the left, there's no constituency out there other than in our city councils and state legislatures and the Congress for subsidizing the wealthy at everyone else's expense. There's just no constituency out there for it. And so, we want to highlight those types of issues. Then our third area is protect our liberties. Things like fighting civil asset forfeiture, ending it completely, not just fixing it slightly. Things like we did the police camera initiative in Ferguson, Missouri, and it's more important than it sounds. That people might not know, and I know I'm doing a little tangent, but I'll try to be quick. Might not know that Ferguson, Missouri, they already had police cameras when Michael Brown was killed, and then they started using them. But even after they started using them, they didn't have any rules. And so there was an incident where they had the cameras, but they didn't turn them on, they said. And then there was another incident where they did turn them on, but they didn't want to release the video. Well, if there's no rules, cameras just become another advantage for the police to use when it helps them and not to use when it doesn't help them. So anyway, we went in there and working with a local guy, Nick Krisoff, who's a great activist, and passed a measure that requires that they wear the cameras, that they turn them on. If they don't, there's consequences, and that they release that information to the public, that the public has a right to that information. So anyway, it's a little detour, but those sorts of things. So we're continuing to work on all these things, but and our main area of expertise is in ballot initiatives and putting things on the ballot to where people can see them and take part, so that it's a way to be represented without having to go through a politician. And so that's very important to us. But we just saw this opportunity to bring an issue that we think is very important and get out there and do something on it. So this is not something, I mean, I've cared about the draft for as long as I can remember, but this is not something that we were, that we haven't switched everything to just work on this, but we just decided this was something that no one else was going to do, that needed to be done, and that could, we're just at the right time to make a difference. And politics is tough, and when you see that you have an opportunity, boy, you better grab it. And then I'll get to the rest of your thing, Charles. I think I think you're always at a bigger risk if there's a big recession. Because people are much more worried about their job, and if you're going to pay their kid, even if you're going to enslave them a little bit, they might decide that's is better than just being poor. I do think national service is much more likely to happen than a straight draft. The straight draft is just easier. We all know how to fight it. We all know what to point to. People still remember Vietnam. It's just, and the all volunteer force has been such a big success that it just seems silly to go that route. I do think any national service they come up with will have a military component, but they'll try to use that to say, oh, we're just allowing people to get into the military or whatever else they want to do. So they'll try to pretend that that's choice, your money or your life. That's a choice too, and it's the kind of choice that politicians think we should have. And so I do think that is a real fear. And think about what it says too. I mean, we always talk about young people, but if they can, and I don't believe in the draft, even under any, there's no emergency. There is literally no emergency possible that would make me say, yes, in that situation, someone can put a gun to your head and tell you what to do and make you their slave. There's just nothing that could happen that would make that okay. And of course, the more dire the emergency we'd be told about that we have to have a draft for, the more everyone would be coming out of the woodwork. We've had threats, we've had emergencies. What happened? Everyone came out of the woodwork. The best thing the draft did in World War II is to create some, system in which you could put people in the military that wasn't just chaotic, because everybody wanted to go. And they wanted to go because they believed in it and because it had such support. It's not the same as a Vietnam type thing, but I think that they know they don't need a draft for the military. They might want one to pick and choose, but the military is not looking for a universal draft. They just don't want it. And so national service is much more the threat. And again, no crystal ball. It could be from 2 years from now, we think, oh, nothing ever happened with that. It was no threat. Or in 2 years, we could be seeing the legislation pass. And you just never know in life. I think you got to do what you think is right. And where you see an opportunity, take it. And if at the end of 2 years, I think, geez, I wasted some time fighting, national service or conscription of some form coming back, I can live with that.
Paul, I always remember those great words of wisdom from Barney Fife, is that you need to nip it in the bud. And so that's becomes the case for sure.
He was right
David
about
Demers
that, although
is to hand
Andy
up.
was also right to make him keep his bullet in his pocket.
That's right. There you go, too. David Demarest, I saw you had your hand up at one point. Are you still here with us?
He needs to unmute himself.
Yeah, you're muted by yourself, David. There he is.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Paul, this is David Demers with Roads to Freedom. I get your immediate solutions, and I think they're a good idea. Obviously, the draft is part of a much larger problem. And the concern about national service is valid. Really, it's about control. And my question for you, at the very highest level, what do you think is the underlying root cause of these compulsion issues, like the draft and the possible national service? And what do we need to do to eliminate the root cause of the broader underlying compulsion issues?
Boy, that's a great question. It is a little bit funny. At my trial for not registering for the draft, we blew up a big draft registration card that had all the information on it, but I hadn't signed it. And I was on the stand, and my attorney said, well, here's all the information, Paul, and you're saying this is your correct information. So that would give the government everything, which of course they already have. But why wouldn't you just sign this thing? And I said, because my signature means something. If I sign a check, I'm saying the check is good. If I sign a contract, I'm saying I'm with it. I'm committed. If I sign a draft registration card, I'm saying the same thing, and I will not say that. And in the closing statement, the U.S. attorney made it clear to the jury that whatever Paul J. wants to say about we have all of the information, what the law says is that he must present himself and submit to registration. And so here we are in a day where hard to imagine any real use for the draft in the way our military is constructed at present. Doesn't seem like the military's pushing for it. Doesn't seem, and I keep thinking, why would it, this is a tiny little $25 million, agency. Why wouldn't they just give up the ghost on this? And I think that to give up the ghost on this would be to say, we're giving up the idea that we're in charge, that we're the boss. And I don't know how that, I don't know how that actually seeps through and what the thoughts are in the different people in different places in the bureaucracy. But it doesn't make good sense in terms of any strategy for having a better military or a better country or defeating our enemies or what have you, it seems to only make sense as some sort of we refuse to not continue to make you say you sign that form and let us put our thumb on you for a minute. And I do think that you also, while all this is happening, and while we usually think of the military draft as, I suspect that there's probably more support among conservatives than liberals on the military draft. When you look at national service, it's really flipped. And you're going to have more support on the left for national service and, working in soup kitchens or whatever, than you're going to have on the right. And I think with this resurgence of socialism is the way and government can do all these wonderful things for us, I think I'm a lot more frightened of a return, or not a return, but going to a national service program than I have been in the past. And I do think it's coming more from kind of a socialistic government is the great, the great savior type attitude. And think about it too. I said earlier, I never really, I don't believe in the draft, no matter what the crisis is, because it just still doesn't make sense. But think about what national service would be saying. It always happens to young people, but it really is saying that at any time, for any reason, the government can take any group and just enslave them. And enslave is probably not the right word. It's not this, historically, it's not quite the same thing or something. But that's the reality of it. And think about the freest country in the world, the beacon of freedom. And we really believe that if push comes to shove, whoever has power can take any group. And if they can take any group, can't they take every group and take away their freedom at any time? Not because it's life threatening, but because we think it might do some good. It's just, and to me, David, that is worth having a discussion about. Because if we can get people to see right on this issue, I think I think, Katie barred the door. They might see the whole philosophy. If we can't get people to see right on this issue, I think it's such a watershed issue that if you believe in freedom, but think it's good every once in a while for people in power to be able to take all that away for no real solid excuse even, that's a scary prospect. And I do think that the only way to stop it from coming back is to have enough active opposition among the public that it is no longer in the interests of those in power to bring it up.
This is a very galvanizing issue, the way you're describing it, because it does kind of hit a lot of the right buttons at the right time on all those fronts where everybody can have that same, of being taken aback by what's being done. And the nice thing is, like you're showing it, as a leading into a thing, it's easy for everybody just to go to that page and throw some comments up there. So it isn't a big stretch to try to get a lot of people to do it if you can get that site out in front of as many people as you can, which is obviously something we're going to want to do. Yes.
And I would urge people.
Aaron Matheny had his hand up earlier. A question.
Who?
Aaron Matheny. If you want to unmute him, I think he asked a question earlier.
Okay, Aaron. Oh, here we are. Got it. Are you there, Aaron?
Aaron, you had a question about the sites to help fight this thing?
Yes, sir. And maybe about 10 minutes ago, the page was brought down there, and I was able to get the web address on it.
This is the one to go to leave the comments?
Correct, Ron.
Okay, where is it on there anyway?
Part of the background was, my kids just got home from school, and the two twins are now awake.
Oh, there you go. We're doing this for them, tell them.
Well, and who else has a question? Just unmute yourself.
So here's where you can go to get your comments. I think this is the one still blocking, right? No, this is working right. Okay, this is the link. It's off that inspiredtoserve.gov site. So anyways, just we're kind of coming to the end here. Just keep an eye on our clock, and but this is a good. I mean, this really is a very good situation as far as like where does this hit everybody, and just what you've said is if this is ideally the free country that it's supposed to be, this in and of itself is the most egregious example of what they're trying to pull. That's the opposite of that everybody can see plainly, as opposed to trying to, like you said, argue politics or what have you. So it's a really good issue to kind of drive out there and start changing people's minds in general about government. So this is a great find of yours, because I'm loving term limits and all the rest of the stuff you reeled out there, but you know, they're more esoteric for a lot of people, and this is like everybody can relate to this, so it's great. So I appreciate you coming. We'll definitely want to get posted back on what else is happening since you've got this rolling, and I see we've got till the end of this year. It says these comments are allowed to be submitted until December 31st, so we've got some time, but then again we don't, and so we've got to get on it. So we'll want to have you come back and prime the pump again with us. Charles, who have we got coming up again real quick, and then we're going to kind of let everybody get out of here. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put up our couple links here. So here's the one to share to get people to come and be a part of these weekly webinars, and just by registering you automatically get the recording of it after the fact. And then we also have our own channel up on Brighteon, so you can actually go there and see the collection of the ones that we've had in the past up there. So go ahead, Charles.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Paul. And I'll let you close with, the best link that people can go to help you out there. But speaking of slavery, I think we'll continue that theme a bit next week with Cato's Jeff Singer, a retired surgeon, regarding the war on pain patients. There's up to a fifth of Americans who are kind of slaves to whatever they can get medicine-wise for the relief of their pain. And that's going to be a big issue. And the next couple weeks after that, we're going to have Jonathan Bidlack from Stop the Spending, to hold politicians to their feet to the fire for overspending. And then another spending group, which is going to disclose kind of the hidden spending and all the bureaucracies nationwide. And then a month from now, this Wednesday, a month from now, we'll have the Tea Party here talking about the chaos in healthcare and how the Center Rights Coalition is alleged not to have any healthcare solutions, but in fact they do, even if there's some arguments over what is the best way to go. So, Paul, what is the website to leave everyone on this call to help you out with your issue?
Well, I think the best website for this issue will be thisiscommonsense.com, which is my daily commentary. You'll see the Just Say No to the Draft. There's also a link you'll see underneath where it says the draft. There's an archive of everything I've written on the draft, and there's also links to different things. So I'm going to try to, I've kind of made a commitment to try to, anytime there's news on this, to do a common sense commentary on it, because I think it's easy for people not to be paying attention to this. It's not the biggest issue in the world. I'm not, just because it's not happening right at this moment. But I think that's the best place to go is thisiscommonsense.com. You can also, anyone who wants to contact me, probably the best way, I'd give my phone number out, but I'm afraid I'd get other calls. But is my email, paul@libertyifund.org. If you have any questions, need anything, don't find something you want to find, but I think the Common Sense website is the best place, and we're really pumping it because I confronted this issue when I was 19. I'm hoping that now that I'm an old man, that some of us other old men and women can weigh in and help the young people out a little bit. So my theme is save the young people. I even like them better than whales.
Paul, also people can contact you to set up an initiative in any states on more or less any liberty issue as well. You're sort of the veteran in the process.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that, Charles, because I'm big about saying here's some of the things that we work on, but we don't have all the great ideas, and we're constantly, someone calls or we bump into someone who has a great idea we never thought of. So if it's a pro-liberty issue, we will work with you and help you as much as we can. And that doesn't have to be something we thought up. In fact, sometimes it's better if it's something you thought up.
Fantastic. Well, that was a great way to end the day here. I have to say this was much more interesting and compelling than I potentially thought it was going to be, and really started to hit home pretty hard about halfway through there, I have to say. So thanks everyone for coming today. We will see you next week. As you can see, we're going to have a lot more to inspire us and get us motivated to make some things happen here. Because it's, again, as every week proves, it's us getting off the couch, making something happen every single time. It doesn't matter what the topic has been. That's always the final analysis. So thanks for reminding us once again, Paul.